Page 191, problem number 3. The school wants to compare the ACT scores of those students who complete a college core of courses to those who do not complete the core. So we're really looking at average scores. We're saying we think the average ACT score of one group may or may not be equal to the average ACT score of another group. So we're comparing two averages. Okay, so from that information, I think we can state our hypotheses. So our null hypothesis is that the average ACT score of people who complete the core is equal to the average ACT score of people who do not complete the core. I'll say NC. And what we're trying to show is that the average who complete the core is not equal to the average who do not complete the core. Okay, let's read the rest of the problem. So we've got 65 students who complete the core, and they score an average of 24.0 with a standard deviation of 4.7. Now we've got 34 students who don't complete the core. They have an average ACT score of 19.6 with a standard deviation of 4.4. So the question is, does completing the core courses produce a higher ACT score at a 95% level of significance? Now, hold on a second. Seeing this word here, higher, it's underlined here. It's a significant word for us. This means we're trying to show that if you complete a core set of courses, your ACT score will be greater than if you don't. So that changes things a little bit. So instead of saying equals and not equals, here's what we're looking for here. We're trying to show that completing the core set of courses will give you a higher average ACT score than if you don't complete that core. Makes sense. So if you take a lot of math, science, English, and history courses, your average ACT score will be higher than if you don't. Now our null hypothesis then is every case besides this. We have to say, we assume that completing the core courses will give you a lower or equal score. We're trying to show that completing the core set of courses will give you a greater score. Okay, so let's check this out. Choose the appropriate test. So we're comparing the averages of two different groups here. So it's going to be a two-sample, either a t-test or a z-test. Now, since we have a large number of students in each of these, we know our standard deviations. Let's use a two-sample z-test. Okay, next part. To find the p-value, we could use a formula here, or we can pull out our calculators. And let's let this calculator do the work for us. So I'm going to press my stat key and go over to tests. Now the test I want is the two-sample z-test, third choice in this menu. We're going to enter in some statistics. First thing, we need our first standard deviation, which is 4.7. Second standard deviation, which is 4.4. Then our first average in our sample is 24. And there were 65 students. Our second average is 19.6. And that is with 34 students. Now, careful with this sign. What we want to do is have the sign that we have here for our alternate hypothesis. We're trying to show that the average of the first group is higher than the average for the second group. And we'll calculate. Okay, the value we need here is this p-value. Now careful, it looks like p is equal to 1.97. Now p is a probability. It's always between 0 and 1. So this doesn't make sense until we look over here and see this e minus 6. This means that it is in scientific notation, which really means 1.97 times 10 to the negative 6. Now, if we move that decimal over 6 places, this is 0.000000197. This is very, very small. So there's a very, very, very small chance that this null hypothesis is true. Or that if this were the case, that the samples we would have collected data from would have given us data this extreme. So since p is very small, it's definitely below 0.05. We will definitely reject the null hypothesis. So We think there's a very, very small chance, in fact, it's close to zero chance, that the average of core students would be less than or equal to the average of non-core students. We feel strongly that completing a core set of courses will give you a higher average ACT score.